You're not afraid of the dark, are you?
My God, it's full of stars.
Quite an experience to live in fear, isn't it?
You have to consider the possibility that God does not like you. He never wanted you. In all probability, he hates you. This is not the worst thing that can happen.
It isn't.
There is a greater darkness than the one we fight. It is the darkness of the soul that has lost its way. The war we fight is not against powers and principalities. It is against chaos and despair. Greater than the death of flesh is the death of hope. The death of dreams. Against this peril we can never surrender. The future is all around us, waiting in moments of transition to be born in moments of revelation. No one knows the shape of that future or where it will take us. We know only that it is always born in pain.
Welcome, my beloved true seekers, to Coffee, Cigarettes, and Gnosis, broadcast from the virtual Alexandria through the always unstable free thought media. This is the always approachable, comprehensive, and affable discussion about the world's favorite and least known heretics, the Gnostics and their brethren in the Esoterica. As always, we will try and stay away from scholarly pontification and definitely stay away from New Age babble. My mortal name is Miguel Connor, otherwise known as your host, Abraxas, that terrible god above God as the ancients knew him.
You're pathetic, just so you know.
So besides a warm welcome on this July 10th, 2007, I hope you've got fuel in your cup and some plant substance to ignite. We're writing our own gospels and living our own myths here. We don't take prisoners at Coffee, Cigarettes, and Gnosis, we liberate them. And it is our hope that with each show you yourself can remove one more chain link placed on your spirit that not only keeps you bound to the kenoma, the emptiness that is the universe, but slowly awakens you to your divine potential of a creature of light that must release more light back to the treasury of light.
Remember, no matter where you go, there you are.
We are living in new apostolic times. Philip K. Dick said it began in 1974. I put it at 1979 when the Nag Hammadi Library became truly available to the public. After all, the Nag Hammadi Library doesn't contain information, as the great Dick wrote, but it is living information that spreads like an antibiotic against the virus of orthodoxy.
Why do you taunt me with your darkness? Your evil is stinking up our streets. The end is near. We are all gonna die.
Today, or actually in this eternal now, we long overdue deal with Hermeticism, the pagan cousin of Gnosticism proper. It can also be called the more positive relativism of Gnosticism, and one which many true seekers out there prefer. Both Gnosticism and Hermeticism thrived and more than likely burgeoned in Hellenistic Egypt in the early AD centuries, although Gnosticism is probably earlier than Hermetism. But as many scholars have postulated, perhaps Hermetism comes even earlier from the mystery religions of ancient pagan Egypt. We don't truly know, but we do know that a sundry of esoteric treasures came from this school of thought and religion.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
There are certainly striking similarities between Hermeticism and Gnosticism, including the keynote of nosis as the ultimate realization of the human condition. There is also the similarity that within each human being there is a fragment of heaven that can return to its source by leaving the layers of humanity, time, and space.
You see, none of it was real. It was illusion. Your art, your science, it was all a nightmare. Now it's done. Finished.
Yet Hermetism, as mentioned before, takes a more optimistic role borrowed from the Greek myth of Narcissus. In its cosmology, the Logos, or the mind of God, or the first thought of God, was enchanted by his reflection down in the realm of the Demiurge, who is not considered negative in the same vein as Plato's demiurge. The demiurge simply fashions the universe out of leftover matter from the pleroma, or the world of ideas.
I am the supreme being. I'm not entirely dim.
Anyway, this loving curiosity leads the Logos down the heavens until he is weighed down by the angels that fall in love with his divine perfection. And thus he is trapped on this world, but in a less deleterious way. All the Logos needs to do is purify himself, turn his lead into gold. Like with Gnosticism, the path of ascent is the same as the path of descent. But the ascent isn't a spiritual fistfight, but a regaining of godly knowledge. This represents the plight of all humans. There is also more alchemy and astrology than with Gnosticism, although less stern philosophy and theology.
I'm prophetic, not infallible.
Hermeticism is centered around the mysterious figure of Hermes Trismegistus, which we will deal with shortly. Let us say that he is a mystifying figure that is the source of all Hermetic ideals. The term "as above, so below" is accredited to Mr. Hermes. He was accepted in medieval times because many believed that he interacted with Moses himself.
Moses, this is the Lord thy God, commanding you to obey my law. Do you hear me?
Yes, I hear you, I hear you. A deaf man could hear you.
What?
Nothing, forget it.
Later, though, he was repudiated, but the Enlightenment came and it was just too late. Like Jesus, Buddha, and Krishna, he is more than likely a mythological character, a principle of the universe, and an indwelling savior.
Why me? Because you're perfect. You have a point there.
Our guest today gives a much better view on Hermeticism. This is Aaron Leech, author of Secrets of the Magickal Grimoires, the classic texts of Magickal Deciphered. He also runs an amazing website dealing with all types of arcane ventures, including Solomonic and Enochian Magic, Astral Travel, Hermeticism, of course, paganism, Gnosticism, Cabala, historical occultism, and so much more. Check it out, and check out at KEPH777.tripod.cam. You can lose yourself for days in very well written articles and links on all that is mysterious and wondrous in our underground society.
Buckle your seatbelt, Dorothy, because Kansas is going bye-bye.
Now I'd like to read about Hermes Trismegistus and his attributed works from David Fiedler's Jesus Christ, Son of God. I think you'll note the similarities between this pagan logos and the Gnostic logos. Here it be.
Were you going to plagiarize the whole thing for us? Do you have any thoughts of your own on this matter? Or is that your thing? You come into a bar, you read some obscure passage, and then pretend you pawn it off as your own idea just to impress some girls? Embarrass my friend?
The name Hermes Trismegistus, thrice great Hermes, is connected with those valuable writings of pagan gnosis known as the Corpus Hermeticum. Like the introduction to the Gospel of John, the Hermetic writings orbit around the Hellenistic idea of the solar logos. Hence, according to one of the Hermetic tractates, the light word which emanated from mind is the Son of God. Having taken over the attributes of the ancient Egyptian divinity Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus was imagined as an ancient sage, the revealer of all arts and sciences, the inventor of the alphabet, mathematics, writing, theology, geometry, and so on.
I know Kung Fu.
The Hermetic writings were naturally attributed to him because, as Lamblicus notes, Hermes the god who presides over language was formerly very properly considered as common to all priests, and the power who presides over the true science concerning the gods is one and the same in the whole of things. Hence our ancestors dedicated the inventions of their wisdom to this deity, inscribing all their own writings with the name of Hermes. The Hermetic sermons, or logio, are written in dialogue from in between Hermes, the informing word, and a student. Trismegistus is in reality the Egyptian personification of the universal order, as Gnostic revealer. As one scholar notes, he was the source of all knowledge, previously known only to the gods. For the Christians, Christ the Logos was the Gnostic revealer, the bestower of liberating knowledge and heavenly wisdom. The quote-unquote Word manifests itself as a mediator between the eternal heavenly principles and their temporal earthly reflections. A similar function is performed by the dialogues of Hermes Trismegistus and the teachings and miracles of Christ, both of which reflect a common system of cosmological and geometrical symbolism.
We are dreamers, shapers, singers, and makers. We study the mysteries of laser and circuit, crystal and scanner, holographic demons and invocations of equations. These are the tools we employ, and we know many things.
Hermes Trismegistus is not only connected with the important writings of Corpus Hermeticum, but as the inventor of all arts and sciences, he is also associated with the ancient art of alchemy. One of the oldest and most profound of all alchemical documents is the so-called Emerald Tablets of Hermes Trismegistus, and this I will read to you right now.
Let's go, on board, let's go.
Number 1. In truth, certainly and without doubt, whatever is below is like that which is above, and whatever is above is like that which is below, to accomplish the miracle of one thing. Number 2. Just as all things proceed from one alone by meditation on one alone, so also they are born from this one thing by adaptation. Number 3. Its father is the sun, S-U-N, and its mother is the moon. The wind has borne it in his body. Its nurse is the earth. Number 4. It is the father of every miraculous work in the whole world. Number 5. Its power is perfect if it is converted into earth. Number 6. Separated the earth from the fire and the subtle from the gross, softly and with great prudence. Number 7. It rises from earth to heaven and comes down again from heaven to earth, and thus acquires the power of the realities above and the realities below. In this way you will acquire the glory of the whole world, and all darkness will leave you. Number 8. This is the power of all powers, for it conquers everything subtle and penetrates everything solid. Number 9. Thus the little world, microcosm, is created according to the prototype of the great world, the macrocosm. Number 10. From this and in this way, marvelous applications are made. Number 11. For this reason I am called Hermes Trismegistus, for I possess the 3 parts of wisdom of the whole world. Number 12. Perfect is what I have said of the work of the sun. And that, my beloved true seekers, is the Emerald Tablet of Hermes. And I would check some of the other writings like the Poimandres, the Shepherd of Men, and other works from Hermes Trismegistus. But enough of my drivel. Let us saunter to the interview with Aaron Leech.
You seek a great fortune, you three who are now in chains. You will find a fortune, though it would not be the fortune you seek. But first you must travel a long and difficult road, a road fraught with peril. You shall see things wonderful to tell. You shall see a cow on the roof of a cotton house. And oh, so many startlements. I cannot tell you how long this road shall be, but fear not the obstacles in your path, for fate has vouchsafed your reward. Though the road may wind, yea, your hearts grow weary, still shall ye follow the way, even unto your salvation.
This is the Coffee, Cigarettes, and Gnosis interview, and just wanted to say thank you very much, Aaron, for appearing on the show.
Well, thank you, Miguel, for asking me to be here.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for taking the time. Why don't we start with the heavy stuff, a little loaded question. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, your book, and your work?
Oh, well, let's see, about myself. I've been studying occultism and magic since I was a teenager, but I generally consider I consider that I got serious about my path really when I moved out on my own for the first time, and I ended up in Denver. That's where I first encountered the neo-pagan movement, and this was just in the end days, and I mean literally in the last months before the neo-pagan movement became a popular fad and got its own television show and its own clothing line and all of that. But I learned a lot from those people, and they were the first ones that handed me Modern Magic by Don Craig. And he's the one that introduced me really to the Cabala and Hermeticism and Solomonic evocation and all the things that I really got passionate about and kind of dedicated the next 15 years of my life to studying. I guess my main passion has been Solomonic Magic, which is what my book Secrets of the Magical Grimoires is about.
Wait, can I interrupt you if you don't mind, Aaron?
Oh, yeah,
what exactly, for those listeners who don't know, what is Solomonic Magic?
Solomonic Magic, Solomonic is actually more of a genre term than it is anything else. It's a specific set of literature that was written around about the time of the medieval era, the Renaissance era as well, mostly in Europe. And they were books that were attributed to King Solomon in a mythical sense. They weren't actually written by, the actual king, who ruled in Palestine. But they were kind of a gathering of magic set in a Christian context, but they gathered everything they could find from the pagans that surrounded them, from the Jewish mystics that surrounded them, the Muslim mystics that they could encounter. And this produced this genre of magic and mysticism that they attributed to King Solomon and other biblical figures. At the time I was in Denver and just starting out on all this stuff, this was introduced to me a little bit out of its historical context, but it was introduced to me as Old Testament magic. And a lot of people still look at it that way today, even though it's not exactly accurate.
What made you start your website with all those great articles?
Well, the website actually started years ago when, even before the internet itself was popular, when people would still call up local bulletin board systems and post in forums, on that level.
Right.
And I found that in those forums, as I was studying and sharing what I was learning with, the other people there, certain questions would be raised over and over again, and you'd end up posting the same answer over and over again. So when the internet came along and people started, putting up their web pages, it seemed very convenient to just take answers to questions that I got asked a lot and put them on a web page that I could refer people to. And then those simple answers in time developed into fuller, more scholarly essays with bibliographies and, all of that stuff. And it just kind of developed from there.
Okay, sounds great. It's for the listeners, it's a great website. What's the address again?
I'm known most places on the web. I'm known as KEF777. That's KHEPH 777, and the website is KEF777.tripod.com.
Okay, wonderful. And
find my writings and everything else. Portal to my MySpace page and everything else right there.
And some great guides to meditation and other stuff, which I enjoyed a lot. Why don't we start with Hermeticism? What are the origins of it?
Well, first of all, you got to understand that Hermeticism really is kind of an umbrella term today. It's so foundational to the Western mystery tradition, and it's so all-pervasive in our traditions that usually when you try to describe Hermeticism, you end up describing something else that's been influenced by it, like you end up describing alchemy or astrology or even Gnosticism. And when I was looking back and trying to find the origins of the actual movement that we call Hermeticism, what I actually found more was the origins of a set of documents, which are called the Corpus Hermeticum. And those are very fascinating documents because of where and why they originated. You've got to go back to Egypt, but this is the Egypt in the 300s. This is after Alexander invaded from Greece, and Egypt had become a Greek state. And then, of course, later on, of course, Rome took over and it became a Roman state. This is the same time period we're talking about when Cleopatra and Mark Antony did their thing. Cleopatra was the last dynastic ruler of Egypt, and from that point on, it was nothing more than just an annexed land of the ruling empire of the day. And in this Hellenic Egypt, the outsiders began to refer to Egyptians as the Copts, and that's C-O-P-T-S. It's a word with a very convoluted etymology, but it goes back to an Egyptian phrase that means house of Ptah. And these the Copts were the children of the house of Ptah, or what we would today call Egyptians. And like I said, they were Hellenized. So when you talk about the Coptic language, you're talking about the ancient Egyptian language, but it's spelt with the letters of the Greek alphabet. And you see this kind of synchronization going on between the Greek and Egyptian cultures throughout this period of history. Now, this is the cultural cauldron where most of the major foundations and pillars of the Western mystery tradition were born. You had Christianity, which was developing during this time, and to this very day, the oldest organized Christian church, at least who lays claim to being the oldest, is the Coptic or Egyptian church, and they're still centered in Egypt today. Gnosticism also got its birth there, and the oldest Gnostic texts that we found to this date are the Nag Hammadi texts, which themselves are written in the Coptic language. And again, that's ancient Egyptian, but it's written in Greek characters. You also had other spiritual movements that were coming out of this same area. And this is where Hermeticism was born. And what made Hermeticism unique was that you had Christianity and Jesus on one side, and the Gnostics, of course, they had their St. Thomas and the different figures that they venerated. But what this left, of course, you had the Jewish sects, of course, that venerated Moses. And what this left was your typical Egyptian pagan, that regardless of the Hellenization and even the Christianization of the area, these folks remained pagan, just like the ancient Egyptians had. And so they didn't venerate these figures. They ended up venerating a person they called Hermes Trismegistus. And he was a syncretic god. He was a combination of the ancient Egyptian thrice great Thoth, who was the god of wisdom and magic and communication and writing, and the Greek god Hermes, who was Thoth's counterpart. So Hermes Trismegistus was a combination of these two, only they referred to him as if he had been a living human being, the same way that the Christians referred to Jesus and the Jews referred to Moses. And they considered that he had written, in the ancient past, he had written thousands and thousands of documents, almost all of which have been lost. And legend has it that 42 of those documents were a complete curriculum for the Egyptian priesthood. And that of those 42 documents, just a few fragments survived, and those were the Corpus Hermeticum. Now, of course, most of this about Hermes Trismegistus is mythical and legendary, but it shows you the thinking and at the time and the place where those documents were written and circulated and became the foundation of what we call the Hermetic philosophy, named after Hermes Trismegistus.
And the basic philosophy of Hermetism, isn't it pretty similar to Gnosticism? Doesn't it deal with the fall and all that?
Well, yeah, and that's exactly why I made the comment early on about Hermeticism being kind of an umbrella term today, because it's real hard to point to anything and say this is Hermetic philosophy, because if you read the books of the Corpus Hermeticum, you find a lot of Gnosticism. You find it starts with discussion of the monad or the highest divine unity that's completely unknowable and unattainable, and you find discussions of that, of how the monad divides into the duality, and then all of the different aspects of creation emanate out from it, one after the other. It's very Gnostic. A lot of it was borrowed from Gnosticism. They borrowed a lot from the Christians and a lot from the Jewish sects around them. And I think what really set them apart was that while they were describing the same things as these sister sects around them, being pagan Egyptian, they were, you don't see any biblical imagery in the Corpus Hermeticum. You don't see biblical quotes. You don't see contemplations of Genesis or references to patriarchs. Instead, it all sticks to philosophers like Pluto and Hermes Trismegistus himself, and pagan-friendly figures for the time and place, especially.
And so this was a pretty, again, like you said, a pretty large movement in Egypt. When did it start fading away? More or less at the time of the Gnostics and the rise of Christianity?
I wouldn't say it was so much of a fade away. Again, referring back to something I just mentioned earlier, was that Hermeticism very quickly became foundational to the Western mystery tradition. We talk about division of faith today, but really, division of faith has always been in the minds of fundamentalists, and your mystics have always been very willing to hang around with one another over coffee or meat or, beer or whatever they're drinking at the time. And, just talk about their different philosophies and share ideas. And, the Cabala, for instance, was created in the same way. They're Orthodox Jews who say that they own the Cabala, but in reality, the Cabala was created between many minds, Christian and Jewish and Muslim. They all sat around and shared these ideas. And the same is said of the same can be said for Hermeticism. So they were borrowing things from everyone around them, and everyone around them was borrowing things from them, and it just completely disseminated itself out, so that now, you can say you're a Hermeticist just because you study astrology and the summoning of angels, or theurgy, as they call it. But it's very hard to distinguish any particular one philosophy that you can say, this is Hermetic, this was created by the Hermeticists, and this is what we study if we say we're studying Hermeticism, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So it didn't just fade away, it kind of just went into an underground stream and then molded into...
Yeah, it kind of diluted. I don't want to say diluted, but that's probably a correct word. It diluted itself into the greater movement of the Western mystery traditions. Now, I'm glad you brought me back on topic there. As far as it fading away, it pretty much did the same thing that the entire Western mystery tradition did. Was it just pretty much hit a brick wall when the Catholic Church took over? And, when I say the Catholic Church, I'm specifically speaking about the political body that we usually call the medieval Catholic Church.
Right.
The ones that ran the Inquisitions, the ones that burned thousands of books. And we can't lay that at the feet of all Christians, because remember, while the political authorities at the Vatican were instituting all of this nonsense, a lot of your monks and priests were out there furiously transcribing texts and hiding them in jars and caves, to protect them. So you hit this wall, and that's the reason they call it the Dark Ages. And then once, basically after the plague hit and the church's power began to loosen up, all of these texts started coming back out. And so you had a resurgence of Hermeticism in the Renaissance era. And I don't think it's really faded away since then. I think it's been pretty strong even up until today.
Yeah, I heard that actually, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it was the Greek church kept a lot of these texts, and it wasn't it de Medici who brought from the Greek Empire, brought these Greek books to Florence, and that's how it sparked the Renaissance? I mean, it was the Hermetical ideas that sparked the Renaissance, right?
Oh, absolutely, and that's just one of the threads that you can follow into the sparking of the Renaissance. But essentially you are correct. I mean, the foundation of the Renaissance movement was Hermeticism. And once again, this gets back into using Hermeticism as an umbrella term, because people who are labeled as Hermeticists were very willing to look back and start studying astrology, magic, like John Dee, for instance, was a good example. He was very scientific-minded, and to him, magic was just something else to be explored and studied. And that's a very Hermetic mindset. And then, of course, Rosicrucianism, which is another one of our major pillars for the Western mystery tradition, was almost entirely a Hermetic movement. I mean, they were all alchemists and astrologers and spirit summoners that were involved in spreading those ideas around.
Do you have any, so Hermeticism was also influential in the Enlightenment period?
Absolutely, absolutely. I don't know, have you ever read a book called The Rosicrucian Enlightenment by Frances Yates?
No, I'm afraid not.
Oh, that is one of my favorite books on the subject, and I mean, it's almost the definitive work. She explains exactly how the hermetical and alchemical and otherwise mystical movements were responsible for a lot of the change that led first into the Renaissance, then into the Age of Enlightenment, which is where you saw the Royal Society founded. And the Royal Society, which is, you know, like one of the world's most leading scientific bodies, well, they were founded by Hermeticists.
Wow.
And this is also where the Masons were founded, you know, and the Masons claim, and I think they've got some good reason, if not directly, at least in spirit, they do date back to the Rosicrucians. You know, so all of this, you know, Hermeticism was pretty much the mixing pole, or even the glue maybe, that held together everything that we think of as the Western mystery tradition.
Yeah, I've also even heard that Hermeticism is somewhat responsible even for the founding of the United States. At least that's what Dr. Stephen Heller wrote in one of his books. That whole philosophy of, you know, that whole Freemason philosophy.
Absolutely, and I have to agree with that too, because, you know, like I said, you know, the Age of Enlightenment led to the Freemasons led to the founding of America. Even John Dee was very interested in the New World, and he personally invented a lot of the navigation equipment that was being used by the original explorers who were coming over here.
Really? I didn't know that.
Absolutely. You know, and then of course, you know, I keep going on about my man D here, but he was also very responsible for the tone and the direction of what we usually refer to as Elizabethan England, which of course without Elizabethan England there would have never been an Age of Enlightenment, no Royal Society, no Masonic movement. Not as we know them today, anyway.
Yeah, and for the listeners, that's John Dee, who was considered the court magician of Queen Elizabeth, right?
Not only the court magician of Queen Elizabeth, but he was at least one of her principal advisors. He drew up the chart to select the best time for her inauguration.
Wow.
And he was also a general inventor and a scholar who, at the time, was considered to have learned all knowledge available to the human species, which, you know, today that would be an impossible feat, but in his time it was possible, and he did achieve it.
A little off topic, have you heard the theory that he wrote some of Shakespeare's plays?
I don't think I ever ran across the idea that Dee wrote them, but I have looked into that a little bit, and it's off topic, but it is a fascinating subject. We really don't know who wrote Shakespeare's plays. And there were a lot of Hermeticists and Rosicrucians hanging around that crew of the people who might possibly have written the plays.
Maybe it was Hermes Trismegistus.
In spirit, it's always him.
Yeah. And well, while we're in the historical, what was some of the revival? I'm assuming in the 19th century would be the. Oh boy, I'm forgetting the name of it. You mentioned Frances Yates. What was the group they founded?
What was what?
What was the group they founded? Oh, the Golden Dawn. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, well, that wasn't Frances Yates, but yeah, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. That was founded in the late 1800s. It's not widely known, but it was actually founded by a group of Master Masons.
Really?
In the Masonic system, you're probably aware of this. You join and you take 3 degrees. Once you've taken your initiation for those 3 degrees, you become what is called a free and accepted Mason. And then there's any number of orders that, as a Freemason, you're allowed to join. Well, in England, there was one of those orders was called the SRIA, the Societas Rosicruciana in Anglia. This is one of those Masonic groups that claims descent back to the Rosicrucians. The supreme magus of that particular order and some of the other high-ranking members decided that the SRIA was too theoretical. You know, they studied Rosicrucianism and Rosicrucian philosophy, and of course Hermeticism, because they're almost, you know, they're very intertwined.
Right.
But they didn't put it into practice. They weren't mystics or magicians, you know. So these guys wanted to be magicians, so they went off on their own, and so it was the Supreme Magus and these high-ranking officials of the SRIA that created and founded the Golden Dawn. And the reason they had to found it outside of the SRIA was because not only did they want to practice magic, which a lot of their brothers wouldn't approve of, but they also wanted to admit women. So it's always been a rule in the Order of the Golden Dawn that men and women must always be admitted.
And do you see Hermeticism also, I guess maybe it's becoming redundant now, these questions, but do you see it influencing the Theosophical Society or the movement? I guess J.R. Mead was pretty into it.
Yeah, the influence is there. When they were founded, when they started, they had somewhat of a Western bent, but they very quickly became more interested in the Eastern material, which at the time was kind of new. It was just becoming available in the West. Buddhism and the Hindu religion, the idea of karma, and all the stuff that we really take for granted today. This was all brand new to them, and so the Theosophical Society shifted, and they were completely concerned with at least what they understood of Eastern practices. But after the Golden Dawn was founded, Madame Blavatsky learned that there were a good number of her members were also joining the Golden Dawn because they were interested in the Western Hermetic material as well. So to fix that, Madame Blavatsky founded the Hermetic branch of her society. I'm not sure what I don't remember what its exact name was, but that brought in a Hermetic current into Theosophy, basically in an attempt to bring back the members she was losing to the Golden Dawn. And I believe that current is still established and has pretty much permeated Theosophy.
So it's safe to say that the beast himself, Crowley, also was influenced by Hermeticism.
Oh, absolutely. He was a Hermeticist all the way. He was a member of the Golden Dawn. He actually progressed very fast through the Golden Dawn and applied to the Inner Rosicrucian Order, which is called the Order of the Rose of Ruby and the Cross of Gold. But he was so controversial, the other adepts didn't want to let him in, and that caused quite a row at the time. And the original Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn closed down shortly after that, not because of Crowley, but because of another unfortunate incident. And but Crowley went on from there and decided he could do it better, and he founded Thelema based on what he had learned in the Golden Dawn. But he felt he was correcting what the Golden Dawn had taught him and creating a new and better system.
So we've got a pretty good thread from ancient, well, not ancient, but Greek Egypt all the way to the present. And so basically anybody practicing magic with the K will have to know their hermetical ideas and philosophy. I mean, they're very interrelated, magic and Hermeticism.
Absolutely. And it goes back even beyond Greek Egypt, because when those original Egyptian Hermeticists were looking for their own, philosophies to study, they also went back into the old pharaonic Egyptian texts and the papyri and stuff. So they were very interested in conjuring and talisman making and all the stuff we love when we think about magic and the circles and the calling down angels, and that's where we get a lot of that stuff. There, and of course from Babylon, but that's a different thread entirely.
Right, and what exactly is Hermetic Cabala? I've studied Cabala, but unfortunately I haven't gotten to that part of it.
Well, actually, more than likely, you've probably already studied it, although I don't know what sources you've studied for the Kabbalah, but you remember before I said that there are Orthodox Jews that feel they own the Kabbalah, and they actually get offended when they hear about Westerners. Oh, well, how dare you take, our system? And my feeling is that the Kabbalah was created through the sharing of minds of many different cultures, and there is a strictly Jewish tradition of Kabbalah, which you can only learn if you're over the age of 40, male, and learn it from a rabbi. But all of these other minds that shared in the creation of the Kabbalah also took that material and did their own things with it. So on the Christian side of this Judeo-Christian divide, you ended up with what we call the Hermetic Cabala. It uses a lot of the same ideas, and it uses also things that were borrowed even from the strictly Jewish Kabbalah, because Christian mystics of the day were very interested in anything they could learn from a rabbi or from an obscure Jewish text. And they adopted these ideas into the basic Hermetic philosophy, but it's still using the tree of life and the Hebrew names of God and all of the things that you would think of as being Kabbalah, even in the Hebrew sense. So it's our own Western Kabbalah with its own history and its own origin, as opposed to the Jewish Kabbalah.
Okay, why don't we move on to the next topic? You do a very good essay on astral travel, and what I was surprised is the biggest misconception people have of astral travel is that it's an out-of-body experience. Could you explain this and a little bit about astral travel?
Well, in the essay that I wrote, I do try to move the reader away from the out-of-body experience mold. It's not that out-of-body is not possible, and by out-of-body, just for the listeners who are reading, I mean literally, you feel like you stand up, you turn around, you look at your own body laying behind you, you can walk out the room, you can go down the hall and see what someone's doing in the kitchen. That kind of thing, it is possible. I've heard reports of it. I think I've even done it like one time in my life. But that's not astral travel. And when people focus on trying to get that kind of out-of-body experience, or at least in my experience, they waste a lot of time and effort, when astrally projecting is a completely different art and is a lot more useful and a lot more achievable than your typical full out-of-body experience.
So what exactly is it?
Astral travel or out-of-body?
No, astral travel.
Astral travel is, in my opinion, it's more about refocusing your awareness to another aspect of reality that's already there. For instance, we're very used to our normal waking consciousness. We breathe oxygen, we eat the foods we eat, and this gives us a particular chemical balance in the brain that causes us to view reality the way we do. Now, if you do something like take a hallucinogen, you're altering your chemical balance, and you're causing your brain to view a part of reality that was invisible to it before. And this is where you see, your hallucinations, and people have conversations with spirits and everything else when they're under the effects of these drugs. Well, astral travel is the same kind of concept. You are altering your mind into a state that is not restricted by your body or by the usual five senses. And you're simply allowing yourself to move along on what I call a higher plane of existence, although I hate to sound so esoteric about it.
Right.
It's really a part of you that's always there. You're just closing your eyes to what you're used to seeing and letting yourself open up to something else. And then, of course, with ceremonial magic, if you're into that, there's ways to program that experience, through ceremony and talismans and sigils and such, to go to specific places and meet specific beings. But it's also something you can practice without going to specific places. Or if you want to go someplace personal, like construct your own astral temple or astral sacred space or retreat place. All of this stuff is possible, and it all happens in a state of mind that's not bogged down by the usual concerns of your sight and your sense of hearing and touch.
Yeah, and just to make sure the listeners don't freak out, but astral travel or these types of ceremonies, these have been done forever. It's not a New Age thing. I mean, New Age scares me more than the occult. I love the occult. Yeah. New Age just scares me. Yeah.
Well, the New Age, bless its heart, it's really trying, and it's very young, and it's got a lot to learn.
Yeah.
And I know over the years I've seen people who get into the New Age, and they do that for a while, and then they start looking towards some older things, and they start looking into the occult, because they recognize the similarities, but, you know, the New Age, it's kind of for mass consumption, you know. But, no, the kind of, I mean, when you talk about using ceremonies to astral travel to different realms, yes, this is very ancient. You know, this goes right back to Egypt. The Gnostics did it. This goes back to Merkava mysticism, which is a Jewish shamanism almost that existed before the Kabbalah was created. And these people use ceremonies to travel into specific spheres or palaces in heaven. And they would actually go up there and confront and hopefully not be, you know, burned to a cinder by various angels and try to push their way up to see God. And that's what a lot of what we do even to this day with the Tree of Life is based on. And I don't want to confuse your listeners, but almost everywhere in Hermeticism or Kabbalah or Gnosticism, I mean, they all share this in common, even all the way back to Pharaonic Egypt and the Book of the Dead, is the concept of leaving the body either while you're alive or after death and traveling through various realms in the other world, in the spirit world, all the way up toward the divine source. And that's the same thing we do today, and that's the same thing that can be accomplished by learning how to astral travel.
Right, and what I liked about your essay is that you don't really have to have all this ceremonial stuff or join a group. You can actually do this in your own room, right? Oh, absolutely. And I don't want your listeners to be scared off by all this talk about palaces and you know, meeting angels. That's just the ceremonial side of it. The essay that I wrote is really just a how-to. It gives you the step-by-step on how to turn off your senses in your body, turn on your astral senses, and perceive what is there in the immediate space around you on the astral plane, right there in your room. And like I said, it even suggests going and starting to construct and build your own sacred little space of retreat on the astral that you can visit anytime, any place you want to. And maybe can you tell the listeners just a few of the steps to getting there, just so they know it's actually, again, pretty attainable to get into the divine? Oh, it's completely attainable. And I do want to say this before I go on, is that astral travel is actually not my specialty or even something I'm good at, which is exactly why I wrote the essay that we're talking about now, because I found the method that I use through a lot of trial and error and a lot of wasted time, a lot of striving against myself to achieve it. So it's definitely something that's very achievable if you follow the method that I give, because it's a method used by someone who considers himself completely inept at it. And it is very simple. Just outline the steps. You know, I first explain to the reader that your astral body, you know, these are all just fancy words, but what we call your astral body is already there. And the first step to astral travel is simply perceiving that body and putting yourself in it, or again, shifting your consciousness so that your consciousness is in this astral body. And the steps I use it's kind of a darkroom technique. You know, you sit in, well, first you start with the lights on, but you sit in a room and you just look at your hand. You know, you look at your palm and the fingers, and you turn it over, and you look at the back of the hand. And you spend a good long time doing this. You can spend a half an hour to an hour, maybe even for a couple of days, just looking at and getting very familiar not only with every detail of your hand, but also what it looks like when you move it and flex it, and also what it feels like inside the hand whenever you're moving it. And then the next couple of days, you'll turn the light off, and you'll continue this looking at the hand, but you're in pitch darkness, so you're actually envisioning your hand in place of your real hand while you're moving the real one. And since you've spent so much time getting to know your hand visually, you'll find it's very simple to just imagine that it's there. And then your next step is to simply stop moving the hand, but perceive and imagine that the hand that you've been picturing in place of the real one continues to move. And imagine that you can still feel the hand moving. Even though you put your hand on your lap, imagine that it really is still in front of you, moving around and flexing. Then you take this step and you expand it. You do your arms.
and then you do your legs, and you do your torso and your face. And little by little, you build up this perfect mental image of your own body. And by the time you're done, you can sit in a completely pitch black room and completely within your imagination, stand up, walk across the room, handle objects, feel them, taste them, smell them, hear them, and walk back and sit back down in the space of your body and come back to normal consciousness. Now, you'll notice that I did say in imagination. All of this stuff happens just in imagination at first. You know, people worry, well, what if I'm just making this up?
Right.
You can completely relax, because in the beginning, you are just completely making it up. You go, you know, you follow the patterns, you follow the instructions, you know, you follow the script, basically. And little by little, you'll notice that these things that you're having to really concentrate on in order to imagine them and create them in your mind's eye, as you become used to it, that goes away. And you start forgetting about it. It's still there. You can still feel yourself walking and moving around, but now you're looking around you, and you're starting to see things and experience things that you didn't program, that you didn't force and imagine. And that's when the astral experience happens. So what my essay really focuses on is just the steps, just the how-to of building up your awareness of the astral body and moving your state of consciousness into it. And then from there, I give you different suggestions on different directions you can take this and what you can do on the astral.
And when does the temple come in? You build your temple, or I didn't?
Well, the temple is one of the possibilities. I do suggest it. This comes after you've done the darkroom technique, and I actually have exercises for all 5 senses. Once you've done touch, I move on into, I even include taste and smell. I do sound. And once you've built this and you can just concentrate on everything else around you and really feel like you're up and moving around, then you can start calling in any imagery you want, just as if you were lucid dreaming. In fact, you are lucid dreaming. You're just doing it while you're awake. And this is when you can start building not just a temple. I mean, you can build a room, or you can build an entire landscape, if you want to, that's completely personalized to you and that only you will ever have access to. I mean, even the most adept magician in the world would have no way to break into this space.
What about, a lot of the listeners do practice meditation, including myself. Would you advise to do this before your meditation, or is it actually better to do it after you've meditated for a while or prayed for a while?
Well, it really depends on what you mean by meditation. There's 2 kinds of meditation. There's what they call single-pointed or calm-abiding meditation, and there is special insight meditation, or what I usually like to call contemplation. In the first, the single-pointed meditation is the complete calming of the mind. You silence all thought. In the second kind of meditation, special insight, you're allowing thoughts to come because you're allowing experiences to happen, and you're utilizing visualizations, and a lot of the Hermetic meditations are in fact special insight. If you're doing single-pointed meditation, in fact, I highly suggest it, and I even have a course for it on the web page that I gave earlier. It's the same place you can find the Astral Travel course. Single-pointed meditation you want to do beforehand. You want to learn how to control the mind, how to focus it, and how to silence it. So before you begin the Astral Travel techniques, you probably want to spend, whether it takes you weeks or months, you want to dedicate the time to being able to quiet the mind and keep it focused on one thing for any amount of time that you want to. Then you can bring in your Astral Travel techniques. Project yourself onto the astral, and that's where your other kind of meditations or your prayers or anything else can come in. You can do all of that right there in your sacred space on the astral. If you're really, really good at it, you can even begin to do rituals, like Hermetic rituals, like what we call the banishing ritual of the pentagram, or even more complicated rites that are meant to banish and protect and strengthen your aura and your defenses. All of this can be done right there on the astral, even if you're sitting at work.
Wow. Well, that's great. Yeah, definitely got to try some of those techniques. Again, for the listeners, definitely go to his webpage, and he gives it away for free. That's what I was surprised.
Absolutely. Everything I write, I give away for free.
Oh, good. Well, Aaron, thank you very much. I think that's about all the time. I wanted to thank you again. Thank you very much for taking the time, and hopefully we'll have you on soon. Maybe we can talk about more specialized things.
Oh, hey, it's been great. I've had a lot of fun. Thanks a lot for asking me on. It's been an honor.
My pleasure. All right. Well, you have a good evening now. And there you have it, my beloved truth seekers. Aaron Leech, author of Secrets of the Magickal Grimoires, the classic texts of Magick Decipher, here on Coffee, Cigarettes, and Gnosis. He has undoubtedly shed more light on Gnosticism's pagan cousin, Hermeticism, and as well given us a crash course on astral travel. And obviously as well dispelled any notion that astral travel is some new age tinfoil hat vegetarian pursuit. As some of you may be noticing by now, all genuinely esoteric schools deal primarily with a change in consciousness. Why is that? First, and obviously most of humanity is unconscious. Just look at the world. The proof is in the pudding. Secondly, it's because we've all at some point tasted a greater reality than the one we reside in now. We've all understood, in our dreams and innocent fantasies, perhaps staring at a tree line during a golden sunset, perhaps in the arms of a loved one, perhaps in a half-forgotten memory of a childhood we almost had, for an instant, that we are royalty in a system of so much rubbish. We've all yearned for something better, but taking the wrong paths of materiality and emotion. And we've all read those who truly broke free into the heavenly realms of true liberation. So to first start our path to a richer existence, there must be a change of consciousness, and abandonment of the mundane, easy-to-take Starbucks paths of our life. Whether you do it through astral travel, because it is about a change in consciousness, as we found out, or the various tools of gnosis, it doesn't matter. We all make our own footsteps through our own personal paths. What is important is that you shift your human perspective until that which is truly real inside you gets a chance to connect with a higher, meaningful existence. Don't worry about the afterlives because we're already dead. It's as simple as that. Take the red pill and never look back and expect the universe to punish you for this. The Pleroma never promised you a rose garden. And to find more signs that will point to your way of shifting your consciousness, please visit Aaron's website, KHEPH777.tripod.com. He also puts up some killer blogs at his MySpace account. The link you can find at his homepage. Aaron is truly a magician of altruistic wisdom, and I hope we all can become one because we Gnostics will always be outnumbered in any time and place in history. But we fight the good fight by offering world-shattering ideas that often mutate the course of history for the better, and this and so many other shows have more than proven. Now I give my canned adios, while in my heart being so grateful for those of you who joined Aaron and I today. Say it with me, my beloved truth seekers. We are the Gnostics. We travel with those searching for the truth. We avoid those who have found it. We're going home because we've never found a home in this world. Divided we stand, together we rise. I am Abraxas, broadcasting from the virtual Alexandria. The road is ended, the song is over, thought I'd have something more to say. But don't cultivate any troubles, my beloved truth seekers, because like heaven above you, the spy that loved you, I'm keeping all of your secrets safe with me tonight. Hello and goodbye as always.